From Interfaith Alliance, this is State of Belief Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Welton Gaddy. When Hawaii voters elected Tulsi Gabbard, a practicing Hindu American, to represent the 2nd District in the U.S. House of Representatives, they were only able to do so because the seat was vacated by Congresswoman Mazie Hirono, who ran successfully to become the first Buddhist to join the United States Senate. Now, here to talk about that historical event is William Aiken, a friend who is the National Public Affairs Director for Soka Gakkai International USA, a socially engaged lay Buddhist community, and Executive Director of the Washington, D.C. Buddhist Culture Center on Embassy Row. Bill, welcome to State of Belief Radio.
Thanks, Welton. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, I was thinking before we get into the interview, one of the things that is interesting as we talk about religious diversity is that when we find someone like you from the Buddhist community, you're not like all the other Buddhists. And people don't think about diversity within religions. They think about everybody being under one stereotype, because I think I'm right that there are Buddhist communities who would not be as socially active as you are. Would that be the case?
Well, that's true. And I think that you hit it on the head when you intimated that Buddhism is indeed a very diverse tradition. Seen from a distance, all Buddhists may look alike, but in fact, as you get closer, it's roughly as diverse as Christianity. And there's a wide range of practices, there's a wide range of approaches and applications of Buddhist faith to daily living. I'd say a lot of people's opinions about Buddhism being not engaged come from the monastic view of Buddhism, where they look at the monks who are, by definition, not very engaged. They're really focused on spiritual pursuits. But then you have millions upon millions of lay people who are seeking to practice and apply Buddhism in their life, as Christians or as Muslims do, and are looking to find ways to apply those values to the way they live their lives.
I guess I'm just hopeful that when we talk about religion, we realize we best get rid of all stereotypes and deal with the religion that we're talking about at that moment, and know that even within Soka Gakkai, there's also going to be diversity there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that even within my own community, I have to be mindful of the fact that when I express a political view or any other kind of view, there are likely people sitting in that room who have a very different view of things.
Well, there were a number of exciting outcomes in this election for those of us interested in diversity and equality in our government. Mazie Hirono has served in Congress since 2007. What to you is the significance of her election as the first Buddhist in the United States Senate?
First, I'd like to make the point that while Mazie is the first Buddhist senator, she would be now there are 3 representatives in Congress who are Buddhists. She was the first congressperson. She was followed in 2008 by Hank Johnson from Georgia, and now in this year in 2012 also from Hawaii's Colleen Hanabusa. So now there are 3 Buddhist representatives. This is really historic. This is unprecedented. I think it tells a couple of stories. The first picture is that America is becoming just a much more diverse country and a much more diverse community. Specifically, the Asian American community is becoming a bigger part of the American scene. It's a bigger part of the American picture. In the census report, in the 2010 census, it found that Asian Americans were the fastest growing segment of the American population. And so that's something to be recognized. And while Buddhism isn't only limited to Asian Americans who practice, I'd say in the United States, I'd say 65% of American Buddhists are from Asian American background, and about 35% come from Western backgrounds.
This may seem like a obvious question with a very easy answer, but what are the benefits of religious plurality among the representatives in both the House and the Senate?
Well, I think that, number one, it helps us to honor that very important part of the Constitution where it says that Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of a religion. I think there are certainly there have been voices and forces within our country almost since its founding who have wanted to establish a particular religious viewpoint as being the quote-unquote American religious viewpoint. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the lessons we learned from this election, and I think it's just becoming clear looking at our demographic trends, there is no single religious viewpoint in America. Right. And I think religious pluralism is simply coming to terms with that is the case. I find, and I lecture a lot at high schools and at colleges where I'm asked to speak to introduce Buddhism. It's not as familiar to many people. And I'm especially admiring of high school classes where they teach world religions as part of their curriculum, because I think it's becoming basic literacy for citizenship is to understand the wide range of religious viewpoints. And I think for Congress to recognize that as well, I think it can only be good for our Congress.
You know, it also is changing the way political strategists do campaigns. The evangelical Christian community is not the only community that needs to be reached in an election year where people are seeking votes. We're seeing more and more religious communities focusing on the political process. Absolutely.
And it's a way in which the elections are being looked at. Elections tend to break down, and the pollsters in particular tend to break down the American public into groups, into cohorts, and into these subgroups. And so Asian Americans make up one, and maybe someday they'll actually be significant enough numbers, they'll be looking to see which way the Buddhists are trending in the upcoming election. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. But what I noticed that Bloomberg had a piece right after the election saying Asian Americans went 3-1 for President Obama, actually more strongly than Latinos did in the past election. Yeah. So there is definitely an impact coming, and it's growing impact.
Do you agree or disagree? My sense is that when we have religious pluralities in our houses of Congress, it's not that each religious plurality is there to watch out just for their religious tradition, so much as the importance of it is that we get all of these different perspectives that without these people we don't have.
Exactly. I would hate to see that kind of balkanization where you had the Buddhist bloc and the Muslim bloc and the evangelical Christian bloc and the Catholic bloc. I would hate to see that. I would hope that the representatives going to Washington are going there to do the work for the American people, to represent the interests of their constituents, and to do what the country needs to have done. But I also agree with you, Welton, that each religion gives a certain viewpoint or a certain set of values, and that in one case, those values might get a little very strongly emphasized, but a little out of balance if it's carried to extreme. And I think having this diversity of viewpoints does bring a balance to this. I think Christianity has a great history in the case of social justice, and I think that this is a rich part of Christianity. I think there's a tendency within that to get a little dogmatic about things at times.
Oh, surely not.
I'm just saying. I think Buddhism, while it doesn't have that very strong history of human rights, it has a very strong emphasis on compassion, on wisdom, on understanding the interrelatedness, how you can't separate blocks of people. You can't separate my welfare from your welfare. We are, as President Obama had said, we are in this together. And I think this is something that resonates very strongly to a Buddhist viewpoint, this very communitarian approach. I think it's a question of bringing all these points together. I think it enriches and balances the conversation. I agree.
Let me ask you about the work you do. What are the most significant challenges you face in working with Soka Gakkai and the D.C. Buddhist Culture Center?
One of the biggest roles in my job is to communicate on behalf of the Soka Gakkai International SGI Buddhist community to government, academics, public, news media, etc. So it's always a process of educating people about Buddhism, about the diversity of Buddhism, about my own tradition within that diverse stream of religion, etc. I think one of the first areas that I entered upon was working together at the Baptist Joint Committee for Public Affairs with the wonderful people there in working on the issues of free religious exercise as well as separation of church and state. And when there was, for example, Congressman Henry Hyde, who kept bringing up a desire to have an amendment to bring a state-sponsored prayer into the public schools, and there's a need because as adults, I can be in a gathering that will recite Christian prayers or Muslim prayers, and I'm an adult, and I'm not going to feel excluded. I understand the nature of things. But for the children in school, I think the idea of really respecting every tradition and not having a dominant religious tradition expressed in our public schools, for example, becomes a very important role because our kids can feel excluded. And I think that's not what our best American values are. I think we are meant to be an inclusive country. So I had the chance during a meeting with President Clinton in discussions with us, and he said, yes, Congress must understand there are Buddhists in this country. And we have, so it's a challenge to make our voice and our presence heard, but it's a wonderful path to walk on.
Well, let me just offer one opportunity in that regard. If State of Belief listeners are hearing this and are really interested in what you're saying, how can they find out more about you, your organization, and how they can get engaged in it?
Well, I think the good place to start these days, as with most other groups, is go to our website. And for our denomination, for our Buddhist community, our website is sgi-usa.org. And then you can find out all about the SGI. You can find out how to get in touch with a meeting in your area, how to find where it is in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Bill Aiken is the National Public Affairs Director for Soka Gakkai International, USA, and Executive Director of the Washington, D.C. Buddhist Culture Center. He's the co-author of A Reporter's Guide to Buddhism in America. Bill, I really thank you for being with us today on State of Belief Radio and hope that you'll come back again.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.